My name is Tara Walehwa, and this is my story. So growing up, I lived with my mom and my sister, and we were just kind of in and out of church pretty much my whole life until I was about 18. My mom got married to my stepdad, and that is what started us going to church kind of on a regular basis. So my faith was not strong at all. I mean, I was always, believed, but I never lived a life that was a life of a believer. So anything that was hard or anything, it wasn't, a practice of mine to, trust God or seek Christ in anything that I did. Growing up, it was always my goal in life was to find a husband that I loved and get married and have kids. And I wanted to have kids at, just as soon as I could. That's what I looked forward to. And I didn't want to just have kids. I wanted to get pregnant, and I wanted to have a big belly, and I wanted to feel, the kicks, and I wanted to tell my husband, the good news about being pregnant and, all the dreams in life that probably most girls have. And so I couldn't wait. When I met Joel finally in church and we got married, I was so excited to start a family with him. And so when we finally decided it was the right time, obviously I was excited. So it didn't take long for me to realize that I was having trouble or was going to have trouble getting pregnant. And so I went to the doctor and told him that I was concerned, and he told me it was an easy fix. He would just give me some medicine and it would be fine. And so we started some medicine, and I went in for my first ultrasound, and they had realized that there was an abnormality that made it to where I wouldn't be able to probably carry a baby. So they recommended that I go see a fertility specialist. So we went and we saw them, and they took a look at the pictures that we brought with us, and they told us that that was definitely a problem and that I would never be able to carry a baby to full term, and that that was just kind of it. So then we just went home, kind of discussed what the problem was, and obviously I was really bummed and got a phone call from the clinic, and they wanted me to come back in and have more testing because it was the gold standard is what they said. And at first I just told them I don't really want to do this because we already know what it is. Why waste more time looking into it? And they just encouraged me to do it because they really thought it would be important. So I went back in for more testing. I got an MRI done, and then they called us in to the clinic, and we went in, and they basically told us that we should have bought a lottery ticket because we were so just lucky that the results weren't what they had shown, that this was something that they could fix surgically. And so we were very hopeful that that meant something, that meant that we were going to be able to move forward and have kids. So went through the process of surgery and the healing from that. And then not too long after that, we started fertility treatments. So we did 3 or 4 months of artificial insemination, and every single month you go through and you are taking these hormones and these medications that are causing you to have every single symptom of being pregnant. And so every month it would come to the time where I knew that I was pregnant. I had every symptom of pregnancy, and I would plan in my head how I was going to surprise Joel and let him know that, it worked. And we would come to time to take a test, and every single month it was negative, and it was devastating because I knew that I just knew in my heart. And so to find out that I wasn't every month was almost like a loss. So I had so much support during that time, and I actually had a friend at the time who had brought a book about praying and how if I just prayed and believed enough that it would work. And so, this was the first time I had been through something that was truly challenging and was in a time in my life where my relationship with Christ was actually, there and growing. And so I really tried to lean into prayer and trusting, that God had given me a heart for this situation. And so I prayed and, believed with all of my heart that that was enough, and that meant that God would allow me to be pregnant, because, that's what you do, right? And so with every month of the failed pregnancy tests, I became so angry and so bitter. And it's embarrassing sometimes to think of it, but I think it's just a natural reaction that we have, because, we don't get to see the full picture, and we have emotions that are completely normal, but just so angry with God, and like, why would you do this to me? Like, I'm believing that, praying and believing, and you're not allowing this for me. And I was just so angry. So at the end of our artificial insemination treatments, we met with the doctor, and she told us that there were so many months that everything looked perfect, that she didn't understand why it wasn't working, that we should have been able to even get pregnant on our own. But our next step was in vitro. We decided to take a step back and just talk about what our next steps were. And that's when I started praying that if this isn't something that God wanted for me, then I needed Him to change my heart. So along this process, this very long process, I had already mentioned to Joel that, this might not work, and adoption may be something that comes up in an option, our only option if we want to have children. So I had brought up this stuff to Joel, and he unfortunately had a really bad experience with adoption in the past, with his parents adopting some children, and it really just was hard on their family and devastating, to be honest. And so the only time he had seen an adoption, it was that, and so his view was very unhealthy of it. So he told me that that if that was our option, that we would never have children. So I was very upset. I didn't know, at this point where I saw these treatments failing, like what we were going to do. And I knew that my heart, that I was made to be a mom, and I just was like at my worst, and I was so angry and so broken, and so I had nothing left in me, and I just prayed that God would change my heart, kind of out of anger, but desperation of, like, if you have given me this feeling, but you're not going to allow me to do this, then you have to change my heart. And as angry as I was in the time, it honestly was the best prayer that I had ever prayed, because I was finally not trying to control the situation, but giving it over to God, which I had never done before. And so I continued to pray and prayed that, if adoption was something that we were supposed to pursue, I couldn't change Joel's mind, only God could. So I started praying for that. If this is what we're supposed to do, I need you to change his heart too, because I can't do it. Within 2 weeks, it was so crazy to see how different Joel was feeling about adoption. We were both on the exact same page. We felt that it had made no sense at all that this doctor was telling us that everything was perfect, but it wasn't working, and our next step was in vitro, and it just, nothing lined up, and we really felt that we were not doing what we were supposed to be doing. And we were both completely on board with adoption and so excited, and it was just such a huge change for us. So, we decided that we were going to adopt internationally, and I was very selfish. I knew I wanted a little boy from Africa somewhere. It didn't even matter. I just knew that's what my heart wanted. So it made sense that we chose Uganda, since Joel is half Ugandan. So we started the adoption process in Uganda. That process was long, and it was really hard, and We started at number 19, and we would maybe move up so quickly, and then there would be months and months of nothing. And it was just the same emotions as before with the fertility, where, you would feel good in a moment, but then you would feel like, why are you making me wait? Why is this taking so long? And you just couldn't understand why the torture. And, at the time, my friends are all, getting pregnant and having babies, and I am just desperately waiting to be a mom. And it felt so torturous, and I couldn't understand it. But we just waited, and finally, in December of 2012, I got a phone call. I was at work, and I got a phone call from the adoption agency, and I answered, and they told me that we had been matched with a little boy. He was 4 months old, and we were ecstatic. We got the pictures, and we called our friends and family, and we just couldn't have been any happier. And that was the first time that I realized that God's plans were so much bigger than mine. And as much as I wanted to plan for having children earlier, or getting pregnant, I didn't know what was best for me. And so I really saw it in that moment, that if it had happened at any other time, this boy would not be my boy, and I knew he was my boy. So we went through the rest of that process, traveled to Uganda. That's a whole nother story in itself, but completed the adoption process, and we got Kai out of that. Went through, the first several years with Kai and learning how to be parents and going through all of that, and decided, we got to a point where it was time to decide what was next. Do we try fertility treatments again? Joel has insurance that would have covered the majority of fertility treatments, or did we want to do another adoption? And I actually saw a video from Francis Chan, and he was preaching about, adopting, and, people saying that they were waiting, maybe waiting for God to lead them in that direction or tell them to do it. And he was saying, like, why would God not want you to? Why would God not want you to take care of orphans? I felt in that moment that really spoke to me. So I brought it up, to Joel, like, what do you think would be the next step for us? And we both completely agreed that adoption was what we wanted to do. We had no interest in doing fertility treatments again. We knew how adoption turned out the first time, and we had complete peace knowing that it would turn out just as great the second time. So we got with an agency, it was a law firm, and started planning, and they were almost rushing us in the beginning, like, you're a mixed race couple and you're gonna be in high demand, like, hurry up and turn your stuff in. People are gonna wanna pick you. And so we felt really rushed, but it took a lot longer than we thought it would. And I would have friends check in with me, like, are you okay? It's been a long time, are you doing okay? And I just was fine. I had complete peace. It was night and day from the time before, because I had already experienced the situation with Kai and saw that God's plan was perfect. And I knew that if at any point during that process, whether a fertility treatment had succeeded or failed, or I had been matched with another, earlier, it would have been a completely different child. And so I could trust that the timing of this adoption would be perfect. So we waited a lot longer than we anticipated, but in December of 2017, so in December of 2017, I was at work and I got a phone call from our adoption agency. And they told us that we had been picked. And they also told us that the baby was born that morning, and we needed to get to Florida right then. And I was shocked, and I told them that I should probably call Joel and let him know. So I called Joel and told him that we needed to drop everything and travel to Florida. And he told me that we couldn't because he had band practice for church on Thursday, and then he had to play on Sunday. And I told him that we had to go. So we were obviously in complete shock. But we left the next morning at 5 a.m. and traveled to Florida. And we met Mia that day, and she was perfect. She was so perfect, and it was so clear that the timing was exactly what it should have been, God's timing. So we get to the hospital, and we're being walked down the hall with the nurse who's pushing Mia and taking us to a room. And forever and ever, Mia has been Mia's name. Joel and I both knew Mia is what we were going to name our daughter, and Joelle would be her middle name, because that is what Joel's family calls him, is Joel. So Mia Joelle was her name. And the people at the hospital had no idea, who we were or any plans about anything at all. They just knew that this baby was going to be adopted, and the adoptive parents were coming. So as they're pushing her down the hall, the nurse tells us that the day before, the birth mom had left the hospital against medical advice. So the OB nurses didn't want this baby to not have a name. So the labor and delivery nurse decided that they were going to call her Mia. And so the next day, she's in with the nurses in, the newborn nursery, and somebody thought she looked like a Noelle. And they were like, well, we can't call her Noelle because they've already been calling her Mia. And they said, well, we'll call her Mia Noelle. And she was like, so we've been calling her Mia Noelle until you got here. And I looked at her, and I probably gave her the worst look, which wasn't intentional, but I think I was so shocked because obviously I told her, I said, her name is Mia Joelle. And she was like, you're kidding me. And I said, no. And it was the most incredible situation because without going into a ton of detail, there were still things that had to happen before we could leave with Mia. And it's things that would make me very, very nervous, and did make Joel very, very nervous. But anytime I would even slightly get caught in the anxiety of what if, I could think back, and I knew that God had told me that this is your child. Like, she had this name before you even got here, and I felt that was his way of letting me know, like, this is it, she's yours, and I could just sit back and enjoy the whole process of getting to be with our new baby. So at the end of all of this, I have no desire at all to be pregnant and to have a belly and to feel what it's like to have a baby kick. And saying that might not mean much to you, but if you knew that desire that I had before, for me to be able to say that now it's just crazy. I am so grateful for every failed fertility treatment. And I am so grateful for every month that we didn't move up on that waiting list, because if anything had played out any differently, I wouldn't have the family that I have. And my kids are perfect for me, and I love them more than I could love any child. So I'm so grateful that God knows better than I do, and I'm so grateful for His plan. And it's taught me to just trust that He knows, and I can't control things, and I'm grateful that I can't, because clearly His way is way better than mine could ever be. I know He cares for me because He was willing to tell me no and walk with me through that pain, knowing that I would have the feelings and emotions I had, but also knowing that on the other end, it would be what was best for me.
I love you.